Breaking news: Putin's campaign of goodwill to prevent Russia from becoming an international pariah. Fewer than 2 years after being expelled from the UN's Human Rights Council for invading its neighbor, experts now believe that Russia is using Ukraine's own grain supplies to buy votes for its return to a seat on the council. To increase Moscow's chances of winning the 10th of October vote for council membership against 2 other Eastern European nations, Vladimir Putin has ordered his diplomats to go on a charm offensive. Russian officials have called for constructive, mutually respectful dialogue, and described the 47-member Human Rights Council as a key body of the United Nations system, in a position paper sent to dozens of other countries ahead of the vote, striking a tone markedly different from the nuclear threats and wartime saber-rattling of Putin's addresses since he invaded Ukraine. Russia is vying with Albania and Bulgaria for 2 open seats on the council that are designated for countries in Central and Eastern Europe. Ukraine, along with the Czech Republic, is being replaced because its term has expired. It has been reported by experts to The Independent that Moscow is making every effort to overturn the April 2022 vote that saw it kicked out. The final tally was 93 in favor of Russia's suspension, 24 opposed, and 58 neutral. There are reports that Russia is offering voters grain and weapons in exchange for their support. According to Yusuf Syed Khan, a senior lawyer at the international human rights firm Global Rights Compliance, President Putin had already promised grain to African states back in July at the Russia-Africa summit. Simultaneously, Russia is engaged in a systematic pillage of Ukraine's grain, having rebuilt infrastructure to harness the ability to export millions of tons from occupied Ukrainian territory into Russia. The lawyer for war criminals continues, "This is not a coincidence." Russia has been accused of weaponizing global food security in its war against Ukraine, by simultaneously withdrawing from a UN-brokered deal that had allowed Kyiv to keep exporting grain to other parts of the world where rising food prices are pushing more people into poverty, and by attacking key Ukrainian infrastructure with missile strikes. After nearly 18 months, Russia is no closer to being accepted to the Human Rights Council than it was when it was voted out. Khan argues that Russia's international standing can be gauged through the success or failure of its re-entry bid. Khan claims that Russia will try to persuade smaller countries that they do not wish to be instrumentalized to serve the political wills of Western nations, by offering more than just trade. For Russia to win over the African states it so desperately needs to vote for it, this logic may speak to some of the African states, he explains to The Independent. This is in line with the language used by Russian diplomats in their position paper. Russia believes it is important to prevent the increasing trend of turning the Human Rights Council into the instrument, which serves political wills of one group of countries punishing non-loyal governments for their independent internal and external policy, the paper says, according to CNN. Although Western officials have expressed concern about Russia's return to the Council in recent days, former independent UN expert on human rights Alfred de Zayas says he believes the odds are stacked against Russia's return. Currently, the Council includes representatives from 5 countries in Eastern Europe: the Czech Republic, Georgia, Lithuania, Montenegro, and Ukraine. Czech Republic and Ukraine's terms will end in December 2023. He tells The Independent, there are 2 openings, but 3 candidates: Albania, Russia, and Bulgaria. According to de Zayas, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's recent comments to the UN General Assembly in New York did not indicate that a rapprochement with the collective West is any closer. On the other hand, he argues that peace talks to end the conflict in Ukraine are exactly what are needed to get Russia involved in multilateral platforms like the Human Rights Council. To facilitate rich and fruitful dialogue, it would be ideal to invite as many countries as possible to participate. The exclusion of Russia, according to de Zayas, is counterproductive because it eliminates a potential site of compromise and trade. He recommends making use of any and all opportunities for communication because, exactly because there is a war going on, it is crucial to do so. Unfortunately for Putin, his charm offensive is unlikely to work on Khan because of Russia's persistent abuses in Ukraine. Since the first days of its full-scale invasion in February of last year, Russia has been engaged in starvation as a method of warfare across Ukraine, he says, recalling Moscow's serious human rights violations throughout the conflict. The blocking of basic necessities like food, medicine, and clean water from reaching civilians in besieged areas like Chernihiv and Mariupol constitutes unlawful conduct. Recently, Russia has been targeting grain ports along the Danube, which has led to Ukraine shifting its exports to the Salina Channel and coordinating with Romania in an effort to get sanctions lifted against Moscow. At least 270,000 metric tons of grain were destroyed in Russia between the end of July and the beginning of August. There is no legitimate military purpose behind any of this. Rights have been on a steady decline over the last 2 decades, according to the latest report by UN Special Rapporteur Mariana Katsarova, who noted that things have significantly deteriorated since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. The report found that anyone speaking out against Russia's war on Ukraine or daring to criticize government actions was subject to widespread arbitrary arrests, detentions, and harassment. According to the UN, Human Rights Council membership comes with the responsibility to uphold high human rights standards. Khan, who has worked with the UN for a decade on atrocity inquiries, says, "One would hope that all nations vote in line with the HRC membership criteria," adding that Russia is far short on this front.